What would you do if your own parents called you ungrateful at Thanksgiving, their voices slicing through the clatter of forks and fake smiles, right before you uncovered a betrayal years in the making? I'm Clara, and that holiday, I didn't just swallow the turkey. I swallowed a lie that had been choking me since I was a kid until one email changed everything. Want to know how far the truth can burn? Hit that subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Be part of the story. Hi, I'm Clara. On Thanksgiving, my parents called me ungrateful right to my face, surrounded by a table full of relatives pretending to smile through their cranberry sauce and mashed potatoes. But that wasn't the real wound. The real wound had been festering for years, a slow, quiet bleed they thought I'd never notice. Like how they siphoned my college savings to prop up my stepbrother's failing dreams, or how they scrubbed me from every family photo like I was a ghost they'd rather forget existed. I swallowed it all for too long, kept my mouth shut while the cracks spread beneath the surface, jagged and deep. Not anymore. They must regret that word now, ungrateful, because it was the match that lit the whole damn thing up, a fire they couldn't stamp out. It started with the drive over that morning, the air crisp and heavy, with the kind of November chill that seeps into your bones and lingers there. I'd spent the night before staring at my bedroom ceiling, the shadows shifting across the plaster, wondering why I still bothered showing up to these gatherings. My apartment was quiet then, just the hum of the radiator and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, but my mind churned with questions I couldn't answer. The house came into view as I turned the corner, white clapboard siding weathered by time, the porch sagging under a pile of pumpkins Mom had probably bought on sale, and that same faded wreath she'd hung every year since I was a kid, its pine cones drooping like tired memories. I parked behind Uncle Ted's rusted pickup, the tailgate streaked with mud, and sat there with the engine off, watching my breath fog the windshield in soft, fleeting clouds. I could hear them already, the hum of voices leaking through the walls, the clatter of dishes, the fake cheer that always came before the storm. My hands lingered on the steering wheel, knuckles pale against the cold leather, as if I could delay walking into that mess just by staying still a little longer. Inside, the house smelled like roasted turkey and judgment, a thick mix that hit me as soon as I stepped through the door. Aunt Linda swooped in first, her perfume sharp enough to choke on, a floral cloud that stung my nose. Her arms flung wide like she hadn't ignored my last 3 calls about her borrowing money she never paid back. I gave her a half hug, a quick pat that barely grazed her cashmere sweater, and slipped past before she could pull me into more small talk. The living room was a sea of faces, cousins I hadn't seen since last Christmas, their kids darting around with sticky hands and shrill giggles, and Dad at the head of it all, carving the bird with a grin that didn't reach his tired gray eyes. Mom hovered near the kitchen doorway, her apron tied tight around her waist, barking orders at my stepsister Ellie, who was mashing potatoes with a scowl, her movements sharp and resentful, like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Clara, you made it," Mom said, her voice bright but edged like a blade wrapped in silk, cutting through the noise. She didn't look at me long, just darted her eyes back to the stove where a pot of gravy bubbled, her hands fluttering over the burners. I nodded, draped my coat over the back of a chair, and took my spot at the table, same as always, squeezed between Ellie and the wall, the corner pressing into my side like an old bruise. The chair creaked under me, its legs wobbling from years of use, and I shifted, trying to find a position that didn't feel so suffocating. Dinner rolled out slow, the way it always did, a ritual stretched thin by habit. Plates clinked against each other, gravy sloshed onto the tablecloth in small, dark stains, and everyone talked over one another about nothing that mattered. Uncle Ted rambled about his new truck, his voice booming over the chatter as he described the horsepower like it was a living thing. Linda gushed over her grandkids, pulling out her phone to show blurry pictures of them in Halloween costumes, her laughter too loud for the room. Dad cracked a joke about the stuffing being drier than the desert, and the room erupted in laughter, too loud, too fast, a forced chorus that grated against my ears and set my teeth on edge. I kept my head down, pushing carrots around my plate with my fork, counting the minutes until I could slip away unnoticed. The food sat heavy in my stomach, each bite tasting more like obligation than gratitude, a lump I couldn't quite swallow. Then Ellie leaned over, her voice low and sharp, cutting through the hum. "You're quiet tonight. What's wrong? Don't like the food?" I glanced at her, blonde hair pinned up in a tight bun, eyes like Mom's, cold and searching, glinting under the chandelier's light. "It's fine," I said, keeping it short, hoping she'd drop it and let me fade back into the background. She didn't. "You could at least pretend to be happy. It's Thanksgiving, Clara." Her words hung there, loud enough for the table to catch, a barb tossed out to snag attention. Heads turned, slow and deliberate. Mom's spoon froze mid-stir, hovering over the gravy. Dad set his fork down, the metal clinking against the plate, slow and intentional, his eyes narrowing as he looked my way. "Ellie's right," he said, leaning back in his chair, his tone casual but loaded, like a gun with the safety off. "You've got a roof over your head, food on your plate, family all around you. Here, what's with the sour face, Clara? Ungrateful. That's what it is." The word landed like a slap, sharp and stinging, echoing in the sudden hush. Mom nodded, her lips pressed tight, like she'd been waiting for the chance to agree. "We've done everything for you," she added, her voice rising just enough to carry. "And this is how you act?" The room went still, a heavy, suffocating quiet. Forks hovered over plates, eyes flicked between me and them, waiting for the show to unfold. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, a slow burn that prickled my skin, the old ache twisting deep in my chest. Everything for me? Like draining my college fund? 20 grand I'd scraped together from summer jobs at the diner, wiping tables and dodging drunk regulars, to bail out Ellie's husband when his bar went belly up, like editing me out of the family slideshow at Grandma's funeral, frame by frame, until I was just a shadow they didn't have to explain to anyone. I could have said it all right there, let it spill out in a flood and ruin their perfect little scene, watch their faces crumple under the weight of the truth. But I didn't. Not yet. I just stared at my plate, the carrots blurring into orange streaks through the sting in my eyes, and nodded. "Sure," I said, my voice flat, stripped bare. "Thanks for everything." They took it as a win, a surrender they could claim. Conversation picked back up, louder now, like they'd dodged something messy and could move on. Ellie smirked, a quick flash of teeth, satisfied. Mom hummed over her pie, cutting slices with precise, practiced motions. Dad carved another slab of turkey, his knife slicing through the meat with a soft rasp. I sat there, the word ungrateful ringing in my skull like a bell that wouldn't stop, and felt the first spark of something dangerous. A quiet, burning no that I'd been burying for years, rising up through the ashes of all I'd let them take. That afternoon, I slipped out to the porch while they were still scraping plates and stacking dishes in the sink. The air was cold, sharp against my skin, cutting through the wool of my sweater, and I leaned on the railing, staring at the yard where I used to chase fireflies as a kid. The grass was patchy now, yellowed from the frost, but I could still see myself out there, a little girl with tangled hair and bare feet, laughing under a sky full of stars. Back then, it was just me and them. Mom, Dad, a simpler kind of hard, before everything shifted. Then Ellie's mom died. Dad remarried and she came into the picture, all sharp edges and louder laughs, a presence that filled every room she entered. I was 12 when they started rewriting the story, turning me into the extra piece that didn't fit the puzzle they wanted to show the world. By 16, my savings were gone, funneled into Ellie's wedding with its overpriced flowers and open bar, then her car when hers broke down, then her life when she decided she deserved it more. They called it family helping family, their voices smooth and reasonable, but I never saw a dime come my way, never felt the weight of that help tilt in my direction. Inside, I heard Linda's voice rise above the clatter, gushing about Ellie's new promotion at the bank. "She's got it all together," she said, her tone dripping with pride, and Mum chimed in, "Always has." The words twisted in my gut. a dull ache that spread as I pressed my palms into the rough wood of the railing, feeling the splinters bite into my skin. Always has, like I'd never stayed up late finishing their taxes on the kitchen table when Dad broke his leg and couldn't work. My eyes burning from the numbers swimming on the page. Like I hadn't driven Mom to chemo appointments in that beat-up sedan, sitting in the waiting room with stale coffee and magazines from 3 years ago, my hands shaking while she came out pale and silent. Like I hadn't spent years shrinking myself down, biting my tongue, so they could keep pretending I didn't matter. I went back in for my coat, dodging the kitchen where Ellie was holding court, her laugh cutting through the noise like a blade through butter. The room was warm, too warm, the heat from the oven and the bodies pressing in, and I felt sweat bead on my forehead as I moved. Dad caught me at the door, his frame filling the narrow hallway. "Leaving already?" he asked. Eyebrows raised, his tone light but laced with accusation, like I was the one being rude for not staying longer. "Yeah," I said, pulling my sleeves on, the fabric catching on my wrists. "Got stuff to do." He shrugged, a quick lift of his shoulders, and turned back to the football game, flickering on the TV, the roar of the crowd spilling out into the hall. Mom didn't even look up from the sink, her hands buried in soapy water, scrubbing a pan with short, angry strokes. I stepped outside, the cold hitting me again, and drove home with the radio off, the silence thick and heavy, their voices still rattling in my head like loose change in a jar. By the time I got to my apartment, the spark had turned into a flame, hot and insistent. I kicked off my boots, the thud echoing in the small space, and opened my laptop, my fingers trembling as they hovered over the keys. One email, just one. But it was going to hit like a thunderclap, loud and unavoidable. I addressed it to every relative still breathing. Linda with her fake tears, Ted with his loud opinions, the cousins who'd fake smiled through dinner like nothing was wrong. I CC'd Ellie's husband, the lawyers who'd shuffled papers to hide the truth behind legal jargon, every in-law who'd nodded along while my life got erased piece by piece. Subject line: the real Thanksgiving story. I wrote it fast, the words spilling out like water from a cracked dam, unstoppable and wild. How they'd taken my college money, every cent I'd earned pouring coffee and flipping burgers, and left me with loans I'd only paid off last year, the weight of those payments dragging me down for a decade. How they'd cropped me out of every memory, every milestone, until I was a stranger in my own family, my face missing from albums and slideshows like I'd never been there at all. How they'd stood there hours ago and called me ungrateful, while their lies sat heavy on the table between us, a feast of deceit they expected me to swallow. I attached screenshots, bank statements I'd dug up from old boxes in my closet, faded emails where Mom promised to make it right with a smiley face that felt like a slap, then never followed through. My heart pounded as I hit send, the whoosh of it echoing in my ears, a sound that felt final, like a door slamming shut. Then I waited, sitting on my couch with the laptop still warm on my knees, the room dark except for the blue glow of the screen. The replies trickled in, slow at first. Linda with a "what is this" nonsense that dripped with indignation. Ted with a "let's not stir the pot kid," like I was still 10 and asking too many questions. Ellie's husband didn't bother responding, probably too busy nursing a beer somewhere. But the cousins, the quiet ones, who'd watched me shrink year after year, they wrote back. "I didn't know," one said, her name lighting up my inbox. "Sarah, the shy one with glasses." "I'm sorry," another typed, short and shaky, from Mark, who used to sneak me extra pie when we were kids. It wasn't much, just a few words scattered across the screen, but it was enough to crack the silence I'd lived in for too long, enough to let a sliver of light through. A week later, the fallout hit like a storm rolling in off the coast. Ellie called first, her voice shrill through the phone, piercing the quiet of my apartment. "You're insane, Clara. Dragging everyone into your pity party? Grow up!" I let her rant, her words bouncing off me like rain on glass, barely touching me now. She went on about loyalty, about family, about how I'd embarrassed them all, her breath hitching with every accusation. "You done?" I asked when she paused, gasping for air, my voice calm and steady. She hung up with a click that felt like a gunshot. Mom texted next, short, clipped, the letters stark on my screen. "We need to talk. Come over." I didn't reply, just let the message sit there, unanswered. Dad left a voicemail, his tone gruff and gravelly, the way it got when he was mad. "This isn't how family works, Clara. You don't air dirty laundry like this, not to everyone." I deleted it without blinking, the sound of his voice fading into nothing as I pressed the button. They thought I'd cave, like I always had, show up at their door with my head down, ready to smooth it over, to apologize for daring to speak. But I was done smoothing, done folding myself into their version of me. I spent that week alone, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the floorboards under my feet. I walked to the park near my place, the one with the crooked benches and the oak trees shedding their last leaves. I sat there with a coffee, the steam curling up in the cold air, and watched the leaves fall, red, gold, brittle, drifting down to the frostbitten grass. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lifting, piece by piece, a slow unraveling of the knots I'd carried. I wasn't the villain they'd painted me as, wasn't ungrateful. I was just tired of being invisible, of letting their story overwrite mine. The cousins kept texting, asking questions, piecing it together like detectives in a case they'd ignored too long. One of them, Jenny, called me on a Tuesday night, her voice soft through the line. She was older, gentler, the kind who'd always slipped me candy at holidays when no one was looking, her hands sticky from peppermint. "I saw the pictures," she said, her tone low, almost a whisper. "You were there, Clara, in all of them, before they changed it. I should have said something back then." I swallowed hard, the ache in my throat sharp and sudden, a lump I couldn't push down. "It's okay," I lied, but she heard the break in my voice, the tremor I couldn't hide. "No, it's not," she said, firm now. "I'm on your side." On my side. 3 words I hadn't heard in a decade, simple but heavy, sinking into me like rain into dry earth. They stuck with me, rattling around as I cooked dinner that night. Pasta with sauce from a jar, simple, mine. I ate at the counter, the TV off, the quiet settling in like a friend who didn't demand anything. The phone stayed silent after that. No more calls, no more texts. Just the stillness of a line drawn. They were circling the wagons, closing ranks, rewriting the story again without me in it. Fine. I'd written my own, and it was sharper, truer than anything they could erase. A month passed, and I got a letter. Not an email, an actual envelope, the kind Mom used to send when I was in college, before everything shifted under my feet. Her handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in spots, like she'd hesitated over every word. "Clara, I'm sick. Been sick a while. Didn't want to tell you like this. Please come." I read it twice, the words blurring as my eyes traced the loops of her letters, then set it on the table and stared at it until the room went dark around me. Sick. The woman who'd scrubbed me out, who'd stood by while Dad called me ungrateful, was asking for me now, her plea scrawled across thin paper. I drove over the next day, the road familiar but heavier this time, each mile pressing down on my chest. The house looked smaller, diminished somehow, the paint peeling in strips, the pumpkins gone, the porch bare and lonely. Inside it was quiet, no clatter of dishes, no voices, just the steady beep of machines from her room upstairs. A rhythm that felt like a countdown. A nurse let me in, her eyes soft and tired, her scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. "She's been asking for you," she said, her voice gentle, and I nodded, climbing the stairs like I was walking through mud, my boots heavy on each step. Mom was in bed, smaller than I'd ever seen her, her frame swallowed by blankets, tubes snaking from her arm to a blinking machine. She turned her head when I stepped in, her eyes cloudy but sharp, catching the light from the window. "Clara," she whispered, her voice thin as paper, fraying at the edges. I stood by the door, arms crossed tight over my chest, waiting for something, anything, to make sense of this. "I messed up," she said, each word slow, like it hurt to push out, her breath shallow. "Shouldn't have let it go so far." I didn't move, didn't soften. Why didn't you stop it? I asked, my voice steady, colder than I meant it to be, cutting through the hum of the room. She blinked, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes, then slipping down her sunken cheeks. I don't know, she said, barely audible. I just didn't. The nurse came back, adjusting a dial on the machine, her movements quiet and practiced, and I stepped closer, close enough to see the lines etched deep in Mom's face, the map of years I'd missed. You called me ungrateful, I said, quieter now, the words slipping out like a confession. In front of everyone? She closed her eyes, a tear sliding free, catching on the pillow. I was wrong, she said, her voice breaking apart. I'm sorry. I wanted to feel something, anger, relief, anything, but it was just empty, a hollow space where the fight used to be, where I'd once begged her to see me. I left before she could say more, turning away as her breath hitched behind me, the nurse's voice following me out into the hall. She kept asking if you were coming every day. I drove home with the windows down, the cold air stinging my face, those words looping in my head like a song I couldn't shake. She'd asked for me, over and over, her voice reaching out too late. The road stretched out dark and empty, the headlights cutting through the night, and I let the wind take the sound of her away. Ubiquitous Christmas came and went, no invites, no calls, just the quiet of my own making. I spent it alone, a small tree in the corner of my apartment with lights I'd strung up myself, their glow soft against the walls. I held a glass of wine in my hand, the red catching the light as I sat on the couch, the room warm from a space heater humming in the corner. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine, earned, a space I'd carved out with every step away from them. Jenny texted that night, said she'd told Linda off at their family dinner, walked out when Ellie tried to spin it all again with her polished lies. You're not crazy, she wrote, her words lighting up my phone. They are. I smiled at that, small but real, the first honest smile I'd felt in months. Mom died in January, quiet, no fuss, slipping away in that upstairs room while I was miles away. I didn't go to the funeral. Heard from Jenny it was all tears and stories, a parade of memories that didn't include me, polished up for the neighbors. Dad sold the house a month later, packed up and moved south with Ellie and her husband, chasing warmer weather and a fresh start I wasn't part of. The cousins split, some circling back to me with tentative texts, some staying in the fold, loyal to the version they'd been sold. I let it be, didn't chase them. The email had done its job. Cracked the shell wide open, let the light pour in where the dark had been. I wasn't waiting for them to see me anymore, wasn't holding my breath for their approval. Spring rolled around, and I started running again. The park near my place waking up with green grass and birdsong. I laced up my sneakers, the soles worn but steady, and cut through the trails, my breath even and strong, the air fresh against my face. I'd found a new job by then. Better pay, a desk by a window where I could watch the city shift through the day, people hurrying, clouds drifting, life moving on. Nights I cooked, pasta with garlic sizzling in the pan, steak seared just the way I liked it, whatever I wanted, and ate with music on, the kind I used to play before they drowned me out with their noise. I framed a picture from years back, me and Jenny at the lake, laughing under a summer sun, no one else in the shot to steal the frame. It sits on my shelf now, a piece of the story they can't touch, its edges curling slightly but holding firm. Thanksgiving came again, a year from the spark that changed everything. I didn't drive anywhere, didn't sit at anyone's table, didn't feel the pull to perform for them. I roasted a chicken in my oven, small, just for me, the skin golden and crisp, the smell filling my apartment with something warm and real. I ate it on the couch, a book open in my lap, the pages soft under my fingers, the words a quiet companion. The phone buzzed halfway through my meal. Jenny, checking in, her voice bright through the line. You okay? She asked when I picked up, a question that felt like a hand reaching out. I looked around, the lights soft against the walls, the air warm with the scent of herbs, the quiet full of me and nothing else. "Yeah," I said, and meant it, the words solid in my mouth. "I'm good." They'd called me ungrateful, and maybe they regretted it now, wherever they were. Dad in his new condo, Ellie in her polished life, Mom in the ground. But it didn't matter anymore. I'd stopped needing their sorry, their guilt, their anything. I'd found my own table, my own peace, a place where I could sit and breathe and be whole. It wasn't just enough. It was everything I'd fought to claim, everything they couldn't take away.